Alright, Suzuki LTR-450 brakes, rear brakes. So over here on the right side of your rear axle is your rear brake caliper. And so basically what you're going to do is you're going to loosen these two bolts right here. First you have to bend these tabs out of the way. Just get a screwdriver or a needle nose pliers, bend those tabs out of the way, which will allow you access to these bolts. And then there's one bolt right here where that hole is, right there, and then another bolt back here. I don't know if you can see that. I'm trying to do this with one hand. I'm trying to give you a good shot here. Anyway, it's back here. Alright, there. Where my finger is. Now you can see it better. 1 and 2. These are all 12mm bolts. I'm sorry, 12mm socket wrench. So you take the two bolts out there with the 12mm socket, and the 2 bolts out there, also a 12mm socket, and that'll allow you to slip this caliper right off. Okay, so once you have it off, after you take those bolts off, you now have access to your rear brake pads. Excuse me for the video, I'm trying to hold a flashlight, a camera, and a brake assembly all with just 2 hands. So this slides right off after you remove those bolts. See, there's your brake pads right in here. Let me see if I can do this. There you go. 1 brake pad, 2 brake pads. So you just kind of pop them out of the way. Okay, so there's the brake pads gone. Those 2 bolts that you originally had to get to, which you had to remove those tabs at first, these 2, or which you had to move the tabs out of the way. You have to remove those because those actually hold the 1 brake pad in place. But this is what it looks like with no brake pads in there. So the next step you're going to have to do is, see this piston right here? My thumb is on the piston right there. You're going to have to take something. I'm going to use a C-clamp and the old brake pad, and I'm going to push back against that piston because you're going to have to get that piston pushed back because the new brake pads are going to have more meat on them than the old brake pads, and you're going to need as much room as possible in order to get this thing back over the rotor. So I'll show you what it looks like once you get that piston pushed back. I didn't have any C-clamps that would fit, but what I did was I just I put both of my brake pads in like this prior to assembling them. I put them both in, and I just kind of put a screwdriver in there. It's really hard to hold a camera and do this. I just kind of put a screwdriver in between the brake pads and the caliper, and I just used the force to push these pads down. A screwdriver in between this piece of metal, sorry about the camera view here, and the brake pad, the new brake pads, and I just kind of used the force, and that allowed me to push that piston down. Basically your main purpose is you want to push this piston down right there. This camera view is really bad right now. I don't know why it's coming in so. There you go. That piston right there, you want to push that down enough so that once you assemble the new brake pads in there and put your bolts back in, it'll be able to go back over top of this rotor again. So I put both of the brake pads in and then inserted a screwdriver in there and just kind of gave it downward force. Alright, so if it's still not enough, once I bolt it back in, I'll have to see if I can push that piston down a little bit. Ideally you want to try and get it flush. You want to get that piston flush, but if you can't get it all the way down, you just need to get it enough so that your assembly will go back over this rotor. So let's see if this will work. Alright, so I was able to get this back on. I pushed that piston down enough. You can look down here and see the new brake pads in there. I hope, if I can get this camera angle up under here. See the new brake pads, they're red. Where's it at? You can just barely see it, but point being is the new brake pads went back over this rotor. Assembly's back on there. Now I just got to get all the bolts back into place. Again, it was the two bolts over here. They go through the brake pads to keep the brake pads in place, and then one bolt goes here, and this locks your caliper in place, and then one bolt goes up here. Where's it at? There it is. One bolt goes up here. Where's this camera? There we go. One bolt goes there. So 1, 2. You get those 2 bolts back in, and then you finish tightening your these 2 bolts up, and then you push the tabs back over, and I'll show you what it looks like after it's all complete. Alright, this is everything all back assembled again. The 2 bolts over here on the left, they are back in there nice and snug. The 2 bolts over here on the right are nice and snug. Make sure you bend these tabs back over. Let me see if I get a clear view here. Tabs that you originally unfolded so you could access these bolts with your ratchet. Make sure you bend them back over. Not exactly sure why they have those tabs there. I'm assuming so that it's just a kind of a precautionary measure so that these bolts don't move. You know, these tabs being in place won't allow these bolts to loosen. So just make sure you kind of push them back over. I just kind of put a screwdriver on there and kind of hammer them back into place, but they're back where they were. So those are the 2 bolts that go all the way through your brake pads, in the one and through the other. And then these other 2 bolts, 1, 2, are your bolts that keep your caliper connected. And again, all it took was just a 12 millimeter ratchet. That's all it was. So I started this maybe 20 minutes ago. 20-minute job, 25-minute job. And there's one last thing, and this is the most important step of all. Do not forget this step. Bleeding your brakes. Your brakes will not work right away until you bleed them. So push on this pad, or push on your rear brake pedal until you feel that it has pressure again. And don't go super fast until you ensure or are assured that this rear brake pedal has pressure again. There it goes. Alright, so when you first do this, you're going to notice that your rear brake pedal doesn't have any pressure, but after you push it a few times, the system will bleed and your brakes will be functional again. So there you go. Brand new rear brake pads. 25-minute job. Very simple.